because something you told me yesterday that I thought was pretty mind-blowing was that MLOps is not a technology problem, it's an organization problem.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's because what is, I mean, look, why do we have MLOps? Why do we have DevOps? If you think of, go back to web engineering, I mean, web engineering was quite painful. You create it's how old I am. You create a WAR file and jump it into the EJB server, there are a lot of things that developers would do over and over and over again. And there was, if we just automate this, our lives would be a lot easier. We don't have to keep copying this file to that file. Or you're going to do a redeployment every time you make a change to the database. You want to redeploy the code, run the test suite, redeploy the code, push it to the web. These kinds of things. And it's this is when you go into a larger organization, they usually have some sort of deployment system built already. And one of the things I know is that most of them are homegrown. Like you don't have, a lot of, there aren't really ML products. Like people might get Chef, but Chef is a specialist tool. It's not a GUI tool. It's not like serverless on Amazon. So you have to, and what happens is the ops systems are designed to deploy the things they've been used to building. And machine learning is very different. The stack is completely different. The hardware requirements are different. The memory requirements are different. The swap requirements are different. It has different artifacts that you don't have in web engineering. The deployment systems are, it's not that hard to deploy a Flask API. It's not most of these things are not complicated web engineering systems that were, it's not like a giant Ruby on Rails app. It's just, most of them are just microservices. But getting that thing to work in the environment you're in, the environments are not structured to handle this new workflow. And most of the work you end up doing is just trying to figure out how to make something fit within the workflow. And the more stubborn people are about it, the harder it is.
Which was my next question.
No, they're extremely stubborn. Because look, most people are not in a company, and I'm talking about enterprises, not so much startups have the same problem. Startups come in and the engineers will come and go, this is how we do software engineering. Like, why are you doing that? This is how we do they know what to do, but there's no critical judgment as to, is this the right thing to do? So you end up doing goofy things. Let's give you some details. Like, for example, DevOps is about provisioning, right? You want to provision something. So you usually have to go and ask someone you have to get permission to do the provisioning. Okay. Well, we go into a client, one of the clients who had the largest Hadoop store in the world, largest Hadoop system in the world. Can you give us a machine to deploy our app? Yes. It has no memory. Why would it need memory? Hadoop doesn't use memory. It has no swap. You gave us a machine with no swap. Okay. What am I supposed to do with this? So, I have to hire someone who's the guy when I would work with me, he actually worked with Ken Thompson, invented the Unix operating system. And you got to go in and figure out what's going on here. Another example, you provision us a machine, especially in large organizations, provisioning is part of the budget. So you can't provision your own machines. So they provision a machine, okay? In the old days, when you installed Python, you had to turn off the throttler on the CPU in order to optimize the BLAST libraries. Because when we install Python and NumPy, there are Fortran libraries. And in order to optimize the Fortran library so you get correct performance, the installer would ask you to turn off the throttle. Well, you need root privilege to do that. So that doesn't exist in the web engineering world. When you do deployments, you don't need root privilege to turn off the throttle. So that's a huge problem. And it creates performance bottlenecks. And these are things now, like now or today, same thing. Like today I worked with a client, they had built their own internal Heroku system. I haven't worked in Heroku in like 10 years. I was doing Ruby on Rails 10 years ago, Heroku. But they had built they copied basically Heroku, and of course there's no documentation. It doesn't work correct, and there's no support. Like, it hasn't been maintained. So you're like, okay, I want to deploy Conda. Oh, in Heroku. How do you do that? It turns out that that's really painful. Conda will just use pip install. Or go, that defeats the whole point. You don't understand. They don't understand the stack. So you have a stack of things where Conda is what you use for dependency management. And they say to you, well, we built you this DevOps system, but forget about all the dependency management you're doing. Just redo it all from scratch because it doesn't fit into our environment. What was the point of having DevOps in the first place? You didn't make my life easier. You made it harder. You should just give me an Ubuntu machine and I'll just write a bash script and deploy it. That would take me a day, not 6 weeks. This is typical. This is what we see internally. And the problem is that, look, there's a famous, I don't know if you guys know Vapnik. So Vapnik is a famous machine learning guy from like 10 years ago. He was a Russian, came over here, wrote his his manifesto on machine learning, this big thick book on Vapnik's book, and then he invented the SVM. So he reinvented logistic regression. So, but it was like the SVM was really popular back. It was like thought to be the next big thing. And Vapnik used to say, one should not solve a problem by posing an intermediate problem, which is harder to solve. And a lot of the ops systems you see in the enterprise make it unbearably hard to get 10 lines of code into production. And that's why it's an organizational issue, because what's happened is this scaffolding is built. And there are people, and again, it's not like you went and bought a product. I mean, usually these are, the scaffolding is there. You have to get access to the database. Well, when you do machine learning, you're going to pull all the data out of the database. Really? Yeah, I'm going to do a query I have 12 joins, and I'm going to pull them from your production database, every day. Well, if you're working for an international company, you're going to block them. Obviously, you can't do that. So they've never seen things like this. Like, why would you do such a large drug? We need all the data. Oh, well, then the data needs to be in a replicated system. But the replicated system isn't, many companies, it's not a real replica. It's missing stuff. How many times have we gone to the clients and the replica isn't actually a replica? Give us a backup of the data. We work with clients to try to do a backup. Oh, somebody suggests using, are you ever tried to use Oracle backup? It's a 700-page book of how to do a backup. So you find that there's some guy running, a Java program on his laptop at night every day, pulling all the database onto his home computer to back it up. And that's the guy you got to find to give you the data. So it just doesn't work. Like the ML systems, they're not designed, or provisioning an AWS bucket. I would like when I started this 10 years ago, I couldn't even get, how do we provision a bucket? Well, you have to set up Amazon on your own personal credit card, and the company will reimburse you. What? I can't get a company credit card? I can't spend $500? No, we can't do it. I mean, I literally had arguments with the CFOs of companies and the CTO, like, what are you doing? Like, and you have like one guy in the company who has the AWS card, right? And you got to find him to get the keys. You have to use his card, because the way AWS works, if you spool up different keys on different credit cards, it's very hard to cross communicate. So these are things that are like, that's what I mean by it's organizational. There's usually some person whose job it is to manage each of the little pieces in the deployment process. And you have to go and find them. And then you have to figure out what goofy thing is going on. What are they doing that you want to do something different? And it just makes it very, very hard.